Yo, yo, everybody. How's it going? What's up, Tommy?
What's up, Dan? I nearly forgot to unmute myself. Wouldn't want to make that mistake.
Yeah, no, I appreciate everyone being patient, starting a little bit after the hour, but to be honest, it's very classic Portuguese, it's like it's almost strange if you actually start on time here in Portugal, I feel like.
When in Lisbon, should we say?
Exactly. But got a lot of really valuable elements here to share. So I think it's going to be worth it, right? And the breakdown of what we're doing, we did this last week and got some really good feedback on it. Oh, we had some
Oh,
music bumping back in there. But anyways, we had some good feedback on it last week. We're just going over the different ambassador programs and ranking them and whatnot. And it was a really fun session as well for us to do. So we're kind of running it back again. And this time we're going to be ranking community frameworks. So on the podcast, we've had about 24, 25 episodes. And every episode, we've covered a community framework. And so we've got a lot of them to kind of think through now, right? So I picked 7 that are good, just a good variety, a good different kind of grouping of them. And we're going to go through and rank them and just jam on them and talk a little bit about them and see what you think, Tommy, and different stories, ideas, clients that we've had, conversations that might have come up from that. And in general, just jam out and learn a lot. So this is going to be condensed learning. But yeah, are you ready for this, everybody? Are you ready for this, Tommy?
I'm ready, man. I've always said about being at co-unity sometimes is like a little community university because it's like I love to see when we go over all these old frameworks and stuff that we try and apply to clients with just not just like modern techniques, but really taking a new approach onto the foundations of amazing community work that many brands and many companies have done over years. And then we just like take this sort of highbrow approach of like, how do we pick out the best bits of all these? And hopefully we can get some nice insights out today.
Awesome. Well, let's get this up here on stage. We got a nice little Fig Jam to work from. We love Fig Jam. I love a good digital whiteboard. I love a physical whiteboard. Even better, I love blackboards. You got to love that nice chalk feeling. But anyways, tangent right there. So yeah, what we're mapping here, what you're looking at is 2 axes. And the axes that we're going to be plotting these frameworks on the x-axis, we have pre-launch, no community yet, early stage community, the first few members, growing community, and established communities. So that's what's on the x-axis. And on the y-axis, we just have kind of low effort to high effort, right? To apply these frameworks. And so we're going to be thinking through as we explain these different frameworks, how they would land on this scale. Are they for more mature community? Are they more helpful for you on the early stage community? Honestly, I think this is going to be really difficult for us to think about where these land because they probably could land in a few different places depending on a variety of circumstances and whatnot. So the idea is just to kind of put them somewhere because honestly, when I was thinking about ranking these like A tier, B tier, C tier, F tier, whatever, I was like, man, all these frameworks are amazing. I feel like we're putting so many frameworks up in A tier. I was like, that's just going to be boring, right? So let's think about how we can apply these. So that's where this came from, but it's going to be still difficult for us to think through on it. So if you've got any thoughts, feel free to drop them in the comments. We'll see them come up here as well. If you think it should go in one section or another section, if you really like one of them, or if you got a question, feel free, whichever platform you're tuning in from, because we're streamed right now to LinkedIn, X, and YouTube. If you drop a comment, we should be able to see it. Tommy can help me keep an eye for that, and we'll make sure we jump into those. So let's think of this more interactive, right? Let's see what everyone else thinks about some of these things. It'd be great to see some comments roll in live while we're diving into this stuff. But yeah, what do you think about this scale, Tommy? You feeling good about this? You think it's going to be easy? You think it's going to be hard?
Yeah, I think it's going to be difficult, but I also I like the way that we're going to do this because a lot of the things it is going to be hard to put them in S tier and A tier, and there's going to be a lot of overlaps. And I feel also maybe some of these frameworks like you've got at the bottom axis here is like depending on where the company is, where the project is as well. So it's going to be, you know, I'm sure we're going to be moving them around a little bit as we go on as well.
Totally. I feel like the effort aspect will be easier to place, but the stage of community could be difficult. Like you could apply
Yeah.
some of these frameworks in an established community, and you could apply some of them pre-launch before you even launch them. But the effort side, some of them are more involved around like if you actually want to go through with the steps of the framework, it takes some time. It takes some resources. You've got multi-department components, as we all know. Kind of, you know, community sits in this weird bucket sometimes between product, between marketing, you know, between customer support. It's like it's an interesting beast that kind of has its tentacles everywhere, right? So yeah, let's jump into just a quick overview of the 7 frameworks that we'll be talking about. So it'll give you an idea and excitement, hopefully being like, hell yeah, Dan, I'm going to tune in for this whole probably 45 more minutes or so. And let's check it out. So the set that we have is number 1, a behavior model around like kind of motivation, ability, the FOG behavior model. I really like it. It's great. Number 2, we've got the social technographics ladder. Little tongue twister in itself, but talks about different rungs of participation intensity within a community. The number 3, we've got the sense of community. This is a psychological framework, thinking through our brains and how we think. The next one, number 4, we have Bartle's player types. This is 4 different motivations or kind of subsets of people that are hiding in every community. It's a really good one for gaming and whatnot as well. So if you're gaming, stick around for that. Then, we got such a classic, the community canvas. Love these guys who created this framework. We've done this, covered elements of this multiple times. I've brought this one up multiple times. In its sense, it's like a core foundational piece of the minimum viable community, the MVC. What are the 3 kind of core pillars? There's 3 main sections. And then there's a bunch of even subsections within that. So it's really helping you map out community, right? And then we've got the support loop. This is really great. Everyone's, you know, vibe coding tools and creating tools. And there's a lot of AI startups and whatnot putting tools out there. And when you got tools that you're selling to people, you got customers, you're going to need some aspects to thinking through customer support. And this is a community framework on how to think through support, which is really valuable, a 4 kind of tiered element to getting answers from a community and how you can think through designing that. So that's a great one. And then we got a good old pirate metrics. It's actually the R framework, which is different stages of very much product-led growth. However, such a nice parallel to product-led growth with community-led growth if you do it in the right way. So I still pulled it in there. So if you're into like scaling product stuff and mapping out product stuff, that is the one we have there. Boom. That's the set. Are you ready for this, Tommy? Are you stoked? Are you excited? Is everyone else excited? If you're tuned in, feel free to drop any sort of exciting emojis or words of just like can't wait, you know. If you want.
I mean, this is going to be interesting to see all these different dynamics here. Like you said, the community canvas, a classic one. I really love this one. I talk to people about this a lot. Yeah, let's dive in. Let's go.
Let's do it. All right. So first one we're going to cover is, this one's a great one. So the FOG behavior model. I actually think about this one even within like employee structures and motivating like employees as well and thinking through your company and whatnot. And so as again, this is a good one to start with because we've also got 2 axes here. It's just like we've got 2 axes on our framework ranking. We got 2 axes here to think about. So you've got one axis, which is the ability axis. So this is from, you know, whether or not it's like fairly easy to do to whether it getting more harder to do. And then on the other axis, you have the motivation. So on whether or not it's, you know, fairly, you know, easy to motivate yourself to do it, on whether or not you just don't really want to do it, right? And the essence is that there's becomes this prompt line. So when you ask someone to do something within the community or within your project, it creates this this line of where it's a success or where it's a failure, right? And the behavior happens to be a success when both the motivation and the ability for that prompt land above the line, basically, right? And so it's a really interesting thing to think through where if something is very hard to do, it's very likely going to fall underneath the line, and you're not going to be able to do it if it's like a really difficult task you don't know how to do. A good example would be like you're asking someone to code the architecture for something, and and they're not allowed to use Claude. And they're like, oh my goodness, that's so hard to do. I can't use Claude. There's no way I'm going to be able to successfully do that. Uh, and so that might be like a fail, right? And then on the other side of things, though, there's also the motivation scale. So similar, same prompt would be like, oh, well, I've got Claude. I could easily do it. All I have to do is do the prompt and be like, hey, code me this architecture thing, you know, easy peasy. It's like very easy ability, but their motivation to do it is say super low. They're like, I don't really want to do it. I just want to watch YouTube and scroll, like, you know, I'm distracted or something, right? And so running basically your community experiences, community campaigns through this lens of the motivation and ability, B equals map kind of process can help give you a better idea on, you know, will this land, will people be interested, be motivated to do this? And do they have the actual ability and skill set to be able to do it? Oftentimes, it's much easier to address the ability side than it is to address the motivation side. It's often, you know, it's like you can't force your kid to do something, for example. Not that I have kids or anything. It's like, you know, you should know this, Tommy. It's like if they really don't want to do something, it's really hard to force them to do something versus like if they know how to do something and they have the ability, then they're able to do whatever, right? Like people get stubborn within their ways, especially when they're more, when they don't have a parent to maybe tell them to do something, but their own like self free will. And they're like, I just don't feel like doing that. I'm not motivated to do that. I'm not going to do it. So education side of different campaigns and things like this is a good aspect to lean into. So it goes quite wide into a variety of different layers to it, right? But yeah, I think it's an interesting one to think through. Any sort of like questions, Tommy? What pops up to mind for you on this overall?
Yeah, I really love this fog behavior model. I know we've discussed it a few times. This one, I've brought this up to people as well, and really, when I look at this, if we just like focus on community building, for example, I think when you think of the fog behavior model, it really allows you to understand the different type of incentives these different personas need, because you could almost like map out all of your community personas on the fog behavior model, and then understand what kind of incentives, what kind of training do these people need to get them across that action line to get the results, right? And it also, for me, I can see the curve of like, what are these different tasks that are really easy to do and really hard to do? And it allows you to sort of think about that in a visual mapping as well. You could almost use our favorite software of Figma and make your own sort of community fog behavior model, right?
Yeah. And you know, while you're speaking, I did actually just want to pull this up because I think it's a little bit confusing with the AI generator, even though it is quite fancy. You know, you can like move this thing. It's like, ooh, it's red. Like, ooh, it's green. You know, you gotta love AI. You get the point. But this helps a little bit more. And also, if you go to behaviormodel.org, you can drill into it a little bit deeper. You can actually go into the motivation side. If you want to learn more about the motivation, you can go deeper into the ability side, which I'd recommend you do as well. But here you can see it's like this is this action line. And if something is fairly, you know, easy to do, it's more likely that it's going to succeed, right? So if it's easy to do and you have just a little bit of motivation, you got motivation, it's like a medium to low motivation, somewhere around 25% motivation, but it's super easy to do, it'll likely be a success, right? So if you take the friction of something within a campaign, especially in the early stages of community, like how do you get people slowly coming in? How do you make the friction low enough where they, you know, they might not have a huge amount of motivation for your community early on because they don't know you that well. They don't trust you that much, right? So you need to make things easier to do so that they're likely to succeed. As you spend more time in the community, you build more trust, you build more friends, you build more connection. You can start to like increase the friction of what you're asking for to be something where they need to be more motivated, likely to actually do it, more, you know, interested there, right? And the ability side, can then become harder, right? So it could be more involved. It could be like writing a Twitter thread or something, right? That's pretty hard to do. So if you're not that motivated, it's going to fail. But if you're very motivated, then it's likely it can come above the line, and it's a success. And this is where, breaking down how you address motivation and, intrinsic versus extrinsic, and you can go all deeper into that. But overall, I think a great frame for thinking through campaigns, thinking through, different stages of the community with how you bring people, up the community curve, which is another framework which we're not covering today. Maybe the next one. But yeah, let's jump into ranking this bad boy. So we got, where is it? Right here. B equals map. Behavior equals motivation times ability times prompt. What are you feeling, Tommy? What's your gut feel?
Yeah, I think this is definitely something like towards the start where, it's mapping out, like as mentioned, like I think of it sometimes in a way of a community. You can really map out these different personas and understand what kind of like, tasks need to be executed, what results need to be had. And then, yeah, I mean, like effort to apply, I suppose it depends how deep you're going to go into it as well, right? It's a difficult one.
Yeah, I agree with you a bit on, like, I'd say on the earlier stage of things, like the scaling side of things. I'm torn between growing and early. It's almost, I think, you know what, we're gonna let ourselves blend the lines on this too. Like if we want to,
Yeah,
put a foot on both sides,
I
I
feel
think I
so.
think we can do that. And I would agree, like thinking through all the different, because there's complexities to motivation and there's some complexities to the education and the ability. And if you do want to implement it and you're like, dang, our people don't have the ability to use our docs to do the thing, it's like takes some friction to learn how to use our product, then it could be something that's much harder to apply if there's more friction related to your product and how people engage with it. If there's less friction related to your product, it could be easier to apply. So I think just because it is a complex one with like driving into the different verticals, I think I'm going to rank it a little bit higher and put it somewhere in between. So maybe we'll just smack it right down there. Need to do some send to back. I don't know why my shortcuts aren't working. There we go. Um, yeah,
First
that
one's on the board. Let's go.
that feels good. That feels good. It's almost a bullseye. We're just a little high, eh? All right, let's jump into the next one. And all right, the tongue twister. Got the social technographics ladder. So this is 7 different rungs of participation intensity, and just thinking through how do you bring people up the ladder of your community, and it labels them in an interesting way. I think that's where the root of this aspect of social technographics comes from. That's Forrester research in 2007. Lee and Burnoff were the people who kind of came up with this principle, and a lot of people have referenced, there was some even earlier work before then that this was inspired by, that they talk about in the report. But in a way, it's like a more, what's the word? I guess you could say fluid or narrative way of like the 99-1 principle, which is very common. 90% lurkers, 9%, active engaged, and 1% leaders. It's trying to put more labels on it. It's almost like a labelized version to that, I guess you could almost say. So when you think about these different rungs, you've got the bottom rung is inactives, people who aren't even active on the project, and then you have this layer of spectators, so people who are maybe reading, listening, watching, these types of things. Then finally you have them this moment where they're kind of crossing more of that threshold. They're a joiner. They actually maintain their profile within their community. There's a bit of an identity that kind of starts to form there. Then there becomes the collectors. These are people who are maybe saving, tagging, voting, curating, and starting to kind of be a little bit more engaged around that layer, being a collector. And then you do have the critics, the people who I think this is meant in a way of both positive and negative. So like positive criticism in a certain sense, constructive criticism maybe per se, and even just more engaged dialogue and whatnot. And yeah, and just like conversational aspects that kind of overlaps into the next one, where when it gets to a certain degree of frequency, I feel like that's where conversationalists just really like have a lot of ongoing conversation as they are. And then finally, like the top of the rung is this layer of creators who are publishing, you know, their original work and the work around it. I would say it is a little bit of a mistake sometimes for projects to instantly just jump to this top rung of the ladder, being like, we want creators, you know. And then the problem is they can go and find creators, and they often go and get creators by just like paying them, right, and pulling them in on that layer. But if you want to build and nurture and kind of move people up this kind of social ladder to the point where they just organically become creators attached to the brand, I mean, that's like the, you know, the almost like the chef's kiss side of things of community, when someone just organically goes all the way up the ladder and then just like drops an amazing thread or explainer or video piece, and gets the attention of the brand, right? And maybe there's programs for that, like we talked about ambassador programs last week, and creator programs are something actually that we're going to talk a little bit about next week. So this might be an interesting thing to kind of also bring up with our guest for that episode. But anyways, what do you think about the social technograph ladder, Tommy? What's your
Yeah,
first
this is a new one to me, so this is really interesting. First thoughts I had was like very similar to it's Patrick Wood's orbit model, right? But however,
thought?
as we're talking through this, it's actually a bit different because I like this ladder of being like almost a way to collect the right kind of metrics. Like, you know, you can see how many people are spectating, how many new members you've got joining, how many people are collecting, etc. And it can really like it can help people understand what kind of metrics they can understand of like the complexities of the community growing and really being able to see that. But yeah, I really like it. And what you mentioned about going, yeah, we see a lot of projects just jumping straight to creators. I will pay, whoever different calls to do this. But if they're not really embedded into the community, if they don't really have a true understanding of what's being built, it's basically fake engagement, fake creation, like creator content and stuff as well. So it's almost needed for people to come through these different steps to really be the best creator, be the best conversationalists, right? And then critics, yeah, feedback and stuff like this as well is all part of that. So yeah, I really like it, man.
Yeah, I think it's something to note around like if you got people within a certain rung, community is all about like how do you bring professional development, how do you bring people up to the next rung within like your brand and within their own journeys as well, right? And level up. And so it's a nice different labelized, as I say, which I don't even know if that's a real word, way of kind of stacking this, right? So let's now stack it in the chart. All right, social technographics ladder. What's your gut telling you, Tommy? What's the first thing coming to your mind with this chart?
I mean, honestly, I already start to feel like I'm just going to keep saying early for a lot of these because when we talk about frameworks, it's like, quite often it's just understanding the different people in the community, what they're doing. However, this could be interesting to apply to even a brand that's been established for a few years and being able to say, okay, how many people have you got on each rung of this ladder, right? So I can feel like it can definitely move in between two. I would put it in the middle again. With difficulty, yeah, I mean it's like you could really apply a basic model of this, I think, and understand like who is meant to be on different rungs.
Yeah, I think
Anywhere
it
else?
definitely comes underneath from a difficulty perspective, the BJ Fogg behavior model. And then yeah, as for the size of it, um, yeah, you might be more towards the bottom of things, the stage you're at. You might be more towards the top of things. You might, general any smaller, even somewhat active community has some spread across all of this.
Mm.
So I think like with it comes to, growing with rituals forming, that feels like maybe just a tad to the right, I feel. um, is maybe a little bit more ideal. Maybe just somewhere around there. Just drop it on there. Let's keep going. There's more good value to come. We don't want people to be waiting while we're dilly dallying on where
Okay.
we're dropping this thing. All right. Next up, sense of community. So this is an interesting one from, it's an older paper report that I pulled this one out of us, which, psychology, our brains, we're, wired pretty similarly. I don't think there's been much involvement from a maybe psychological perspective other than, I don't know, getting into the effects of AI and all sorts of other crazy stuff. But in a certain sense, our core wirings and psychological principles have remained quite constant. And McMillan and Chavis wrote this paper in 1986. This was one that I brought onto the podcast with Disruption Joe, which was back in October 2025. This was, wow, almost a year ago. And there's these four main pillars that are psychological conditions that all have to be present before a group of people feels like a community rather than an audience. So it's an interesting look at like, how do you check the boxes on the psychological checklist of that sense of community, right? So the first one is membership. And this is that there's a component of belonging and having invested in something. There's actually multiple sub elements to the membership one. So if you want to look at the report and go deeper into this, you can, there's layers where you can even go a bit deeper on this, right? But there's an aspect of things like emotional safety, I think was one of them, belonging and identification, personal investment, and I think there's a couple more. But this is all around what you paid for, you value. It's a common kind of symbolized system, right? That, do you share that same language and that mark of the community? So that's the membership side to some degree. We've got aspects here of, boundaries, safety, identification, personal investment, shared symbols. I actually think a lot about, the project, Ritual we work with, and, the campaign that we ran with them around the little sigils in the bios that you might see actually on Twitter, on X. And it is a component of identification. Like you see that and you're like, they're in the Ritual community, right? Which is great. So for leveraging, there's different scales of ways you can leverage that, but that's definitely a box and a core one of membership. To go through the other ones a little bit quicker. So like influence, which I think is important to note that this is bi-directional. It goes both ways, influence in a community, right? And that's like why a lot of people sometimes get it wrong. And that's also where I feel like there's a big definition between audience and community, where influence can flow both ways, right? So the members are able to have some sort of say. They can influence or change the group in some sort of way, or the members, or like the campaigns itself, right? Like they've got that layer. And I think that's why it's really important for brands and projects to think about how do they co-create aspects to the community, the feedback layer and everything, right? And to have a degree of that really makes them feel like they're own it and they're in a part of it, right? So how do you think about the psychological principles of influence? And then there's the integration and needs met. So this is looking at kind of the reinforcement side of it. So it has to actually get you something. Like you're never just in a kind of community for no reason. Like there is some sort of exchange. Like, and actually we just posted that clip by Tolly we dropped from a podcast with Tolly. And that was his part of definition of community, was like value exchange. It was a key core principle. There has to be something I'm getting out of it there, some sort of a economy aspect to it, right? Which I think is really, really important and valuable to have real value exchange, right? Recognition and whatnot, or anything that's there around it. And then the fourth one then is like connection. And this is more on like the emotional connective tissue side. This one is really hard to just, engineer directly. This is like, is a science in a certain sense, but more of like the art side of it, right? This is how do you create that shared history, that shared, component, ritual, event that just kind of blossoms as something where I feel connected to this person, right? Like I think through when you do these crazy side events at conferences. Like I can't remember one of the ones like playing football in these football tournaments, and I meet these guys and then I play with them like 3 games or something, and you just feel this connection, this like emotional shared connection, because we put our sweat out on the field together, our blood, slide tackles, whatever, it's like we went through a journey, a battle together, right? And then you feel more connected with them as almost a mini kind of component. So the more you can nail these different pillars, then the more stronger, I guess you could say, like gravity your community really has, right? But yeah, what do you think, Tony?
Yeah, I really like the sense of community and when people really take the time and effort to think about these complex layers of like these people in their community. And I suppose I'll talk about two of them, which is the needs met first, which is for me, it's one of them things where if you're advertising for the wrong kind of incentives in your community and you don't quite deliver that big enough airdrop or whatever that thing was, it's like the needs aren't going to be met. But if a value exchange is like, hey, you turn up, we're going to give you some value, there might be some training here, like they're actually like milestones that you can reach their needs. So I think that's an element of understanding what is it these people are here for, like can we deliver that. And then on the connection side, emotional connection is something like super difficult to measure. But I remember there was one project which was like you would be there, and if you was missing for a few days you would go back and people like been like, oh hey, how you been? And it's that missing, like you're missing other community members. That's when you know you've got a real little culture of people that are thinking about you while you're away and stuff like this. So yeah, it's a really interesting concept. And I think a lot of problems that happen later on could be uncovered before they happen if you actually like thought about these elements as well for a lot of people.
How are you feeling about the placement? That's
Oh,
interesting.
you keep asking me this. This is like I think with this is like you've kind of like got to already have some people there to be able to look at the data of what's going on,
Mm,
you know,
yeah.
because we're trying to base emotion and human connection on data, right? So it's like it's not going to be there at the start.
Yeah, I feel that. I feel that. I'd agree. I would say it does make more sense to be able to actually, have a sense of community, to have a bit of a community, to have a sense of, right? Um, so maybe a little bit more on the growing side to establish somewhere in that boundary, and then on the difficulty, um, yeah, I mean, there's depending on how you want to take it. I think some of the verticals are fairly self-explanatory, but again, you can take it deep and whatnot. So maybe somewhere around the middle
Yeah,
feels
I
about
mean,
right.
I would tend to feel like I push this up because it's like, how do you measure this stuff like on the metrics, right? It's super difficult. But that's it. We should set a 10
Yeah.
second timer to place these. So let's move on. I
All
think
right.
that's about right.
We'll drop it right there. That's a nice one. We're getting a nice spread pulling up here now, right?
Nice. Yeah.
All righty. Oh, cool. This is a fun one. Bartle's player types. Richard Bartle, 1996. Hey, I hear that was a great year. We had talked about this one with Tolly, and this is when we presented to him after, you mentioned him earlier with that definition of community that kind of came up on the previous framework. But this is when I presented to him because of its association affiliation just with a variety of different things. But it is quite common to see in gaming. But I think so many gaming principles and gamification in general as well is really fascinating to apply towards general business, brands, projects, and whatnot. Like there's so much to learn from the ethos of gaming, I guess you could say, right? And here we talk a little bit about for motivations. I think it's more so better written out as like four subsets of people, four kind of character profiles. And oftentimes when you see this, people will represent them with like the like actual cards, like the diamonds, the hearts, the jacks, the clubs, right? And you've got this kind of fun, layout of it from a playing card perspective. And so you've got these four different types of people oftentimes in your community. And there's a really strong value in not over indexing on one type, right? And having a nice blend, and then that makes better meld of an ecosystem per se in your community, right? So you almost, I would say, could drop this framework, into your local cloud or wherever you want, right, on your computer, and just say, hey, can you audit me on these different four player types? Ask me some questions. Maybe here's an export of my community data, whatever, and like, you can really try and figure out which one of these am I, over indexed on versus maybe not indexed enough, right? And so if we go through them, you've got obviously your competitors, which are important. It's like, who can I beat? This is leaning into the gamification. So if you're a trading community, maybe you've got trading competitions, if you've got traders, right? And that really creates competitors, people who activate more in the community because of that layer of competition. Like, I'm pretty competitive. Like, if you put me into any sort of game or whatever, whether it's Mario Kart, whether it's, on the football pitch, like, I want to win, it's like, and everyone, I think, has this different, spectrum of how competitive they are per se. Some people don't care so much, right? And they might be more like a socializer, like they're more positive. They just want to, like, who can I connect with, right? Like, this might be almost those people who are borderline shadow mods. They like just very active. They're just having conversations. You see them in communities all the time. They're like, hey, how's it going? They're just like, they just want that almost social layer to kind of connect and have a conversation, right? They might be the ones who are always slamming the GMs, every day. They're like, I don't miss a GM every day. Always drop my GM, They want to have that kind of social presence. And then maybe they even are up to the scale of, like, they want to organize events. They want to have people over. They want to host, and whatnot, right? And then you might have explorers, these people who are very curious. And I think when you realize you've got a lot of explorers in your community, you can lean into that with the campaigns or missions that you might create. Like, you can use the lore and the mysteriousness, right? And kind of leverage that to kind of bring them into different areas of your product. Maybe there's like a educational campaign that's a little bit more explorative, and it brings them to different areas of it so they can get more surface area of your project, of your brand, things like this. They may also be always hunting for that alpha and, like, looking in different channels to connect with people around that. They want to learn new things. So it's an interesting one. And then that borders quite closely within the achievers. These are the ones who are like, they just want to earn their whatever it is, right? And that's what they're there for. They're not there to socialize people. They're not there necessarily so much to kind of compete against other people. They're just there directly for as much as they can get themselves, right? And this is where I feel like we see a lot of Web3 projects over indexed on just like, I feel like airdrop farmers kind of fit somewhere highly in this corner of just like, they will jump through any hoop just to know if this is going to get me qualified to get some sort of airdrop. That's the reason I'm there. And the problem over indexing on this type of profile, this type of person, if they're not going to border into these other ones, is after that airdrop or after that achievement is achieved, and there's not like another rung or not a thing for them to move towards and earn something, then they're out, right? And I think that's where we also see a lot of projects just constantly doing the hoop jumping game. I feel like a lot of companies are like, okay, we hired a community to do this. No, it's like, what's our next hoop? It's like, shit, we gotta think of a campaign. What are we gonna do next? Like, all right, let's do some sort of game, right? That's like, do a game night. Let's do an AMA. It's like, next week, what are we doing? Let's grab another hoop. So I'm thinking of a full strategy. Like, if that's you and you're just thinking every week of like, what's the next hoop for my community? There's definitely a whole variety of these different frameworks and systems and things that can kind of help you structure it out more methodically, right? So that you're not in that space. But anyways, there's a little overview of the four different archetypes. What jumped in the top of your brain? Any sort of stories, ideas, projects for you, Tony?
Yeah, this is nice. I really like to think of this as like, if you're able to lay out all your people in these different boxes, it helps you like find ways to overlap them. Like, how can we get these achievers what are just here to, the very top left of like just there for the points or for the rewards? How can we get them competing and connecting with the competitors more? How can we get them, socializing more? How can we put them on a road of discovery and exploring more? So I think it like allows you to really like lay that out nicely. But yeah, this is really cool.
Nice. This brings us over halfway too. All right, Bartle's player types. I'm thinking slightly more on the established side, and on a difficulty level, I think it's not crazy psychologically complicated per se. So I'd put it a little bit lower. So I'm feeling somewhere around this region. Does this feel right for you? What are you thinking?
Yeah, 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 for sure. I feel like it is pretty easy to understand the four different types there, um, purely based on their results, right? But you need some results, need some data to sort of see that. So that's cool.
Boom. Mapped it out there. It's funny. I feel like we're indexing a lot of these quite close to the center because we're like, yeah, I don't want to put something too far out there. But anyways, maybe we'll expand them later. All right. Oh yeah, this is good old classic. So this one here, the community canvas, is something, and actually, I'll show you guys also the website because it's fantastic as well, just so you can see that. Actually, I'll jump to it in a second. Let me map out and just tell you what is this thing all about. So there's three main core pillars. You've got identity, experience, and structure. And each of these different sections has multiple sub themes, which I'll show you here in a second. But the main idea is to really think through these. And I think an interesting thing will be to position this on our chart because I often recommend to projects who are very, very established and have a conversation with them like, yo, let's bring it back to the first principles, the minimum viable community principles, and kind of just take like a breather and just zoom out 30,000 foot level for a second and be like, who is, our community? Like, who actually are they, and then think a little bit more about like what are they actually doing here together, and then finally fill in the third piece of what is like the machinery, what is the the logistics and the platform that we actually need for that, right? And so there's multiple little like sub themes which I'll show you here, and but ultimately I think this framework is a really good way to kind of break down, if you've got these three things checked off, if you know who your community is for, you know what you're going to do together, and you know how you're going to do it, it's almost like you're locked into it. You got the little bit of the why, and the who is an aspect of the identity together. I'd also be asking that question, like, not only who is our community for, but why does it even exist? Like those are kind of your core, borderline base principle layers. And then it's like, well, what are we going to do together? What is our ritual, right? And this is what are the things that bring us together. And then finally, it's like, okay, well, we know who we are, why, our mission, our vision. We know what we want to do together. Like, what structure, what platform makes sense for that? Does it make sense for Discord? Does it make sense for Telegram? Can it just be a WhatsApp group? And I'll give you two like wildly different examples. Like Burning Man, for example, coming up here is is a massive event that happens once a year, and the structure for it again is like IRL, and it happens once a year. And that's a bit of the experience too. It's like the structure is in the middle of the desert, and people kind of bring everything there with them, right? And the experience is, this amazing thing that like people kind of go to, and like they get to unplug from their lives, become someone else, whatever, just like have all these different layer of it. And that's what they do together. They listen to music, they go through all sorts of their own personal journeys and everything, right? And the identity is a bit of a mixed bag, but it's like a component, obviously, of that, right? And then you've got like another flip side. Let's go to like almost the opposite of the spectrum, like with like a religion, like with church. You've got this aspect of an experience. You go to church once a week. The structures within the church, and you got an identity of people there as well, with like the faith and the mission, and everything around that. And it's like a beautiful component that also pulls into the same flow, right? So yeah, what do you think about it overall? I'm going to pull up the actual website where you can check out more resources on this.
Yeah, it's a great one actually, and like you say, if you can really apply this at any stage, but if you're like got a really established brand, you're able to zoom out and you're able to look at the who and the what and the how, and see how you're doing these different things, and really allows you to sort of like segregate what is it we need to improve, what sections of these. And yeah, this is a classic. What is it? Communitycanvas.org. Yeah, this is a great one.
Yeah, no, really great one. I've actually met Sasha, who's one of the contributors who built this. So their website's here, community-canvas.org. I've also written some content pieces on it, translating it more for Web3, because this is not a Web3 community framework in its own specificity originally, but it applies really, really well. And also to like all sorts of other different categories and verticals, of course. So like I said, you got the identity, the purpose. These are the sub themes that I mentioned, the 17 sub themes, the brand values, the definition of success is really important. That really gives you that full on mission, vision layer. And then you've got the what are we doing experience, right? And that might involve different roles, that that shared rituals, the rules behind it, the guidelines, right? The content, the actual elements you're going through with it. And then you have like this, the structure. This is the organization, the financing, like the sustainable business model of it. If it's not, components of making any money, then how is it funded? Is it volunteer? Is it like a nonprofit? Is it, and if so, if there is a revenue model behind it, it's a business, and how does this whole community layer and organization even support that so that that continues, Awesome. Let's plot this one. I definitely would say, like I said, sorry, some loud motorcycles outside. Got my window open. I would definitely say we put it more towards the earlier side, even though, like I mentioned, a well-established one could move it over there. But actually, wait, before I jump into this, tell me what do you love about the minimum viable community and the canvas? You've mentioned this on projects, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like, I also see this a slightly different way, where actually you could progress in the timeline of just starting with the who. Your pre-launch, your pre-raising, you're actually building out them first foundations, and all you need to start off is with the who. And then you can start to expand on these different experiences, and then you start to build the right infrastructure to capture these experiences. So I kind of see it as sort of developing, and I would say if you're going to do the full thing, at once, it's great to go to an established community, an established brand, and really break all these different sections down. But effectively, like you say, we could start at the very beginning of this and just focus on that blue circle there in the middle of the who, understanding them points. And it allows, for example, like marketing spend to be done properly, because like, you're not wasting going into different funnels that you don't need to and stuff like that as well.
Yeah, I actually really like that, because if you have a really strong purpose in its own way, a really strong mission around something, and you have a bit of a profile of people almost like that, I say the ICP, the ideal community profile, just like the ideal customer profile who's going to help with that mission. You can then collectively maybe start to build out from feedback, the shared experiences, the content, the roles. Like these will start to evolve, and maybe the community will co-create some of these with you. And they might even be like, yo, we got to migrate off this Telegram group chat, bro. Like this is getting out of hand. It's just insane. It's too busy. We got to move to a new structure. And then you might even migrate that element of the structure based off of that feedback and that journey, right? So yeah, it could definitely be something more on the earlier stage side of things for sure. So I definitely think it's more in the pre-launch to early side of things, maybe on the border of it. And the difficulty is not, crazy complicated. I would think I would put it somewhere in, like, it definitely should be in this, obviously, the start here box, maybe somewhere right in the middle. What do you think?
I think you forget that you're community expert, Dan, and you say these things aren't difficult. I think, yeah, the 3 different sections as an overview aren't difficult, but when you're really going to dive into these 17 different subsections, it's a lot. But yeah, I would push it more up to a middle.
All right, we'll put it a little more further high. I'll split the difference with you.
I love it.
There's a lot.
I love we're negotiating with positions here, Dan.
Oh yeah, I mean, I love like there's a lot of resources with this one too. We've got a lot of resources. There's a lot of information on communitycanvas.org, some reflections and things to kind of help you with these different elements. So the difficulty level, at least from understanding, isn't too crazy. But then for implementation, is probably like a little bit more evolved, I'd agree. So yeah, we can put it a little bit higher for sure. All right, let's keep trucking. We're almost there. Final stretch. Oh boy, let's get technical. This is a good one. So I actually had a great podcast with Doris at Functor, and we went through this, and she thought it was really interesting. And we talked a lot about product versus community, and just the whole interesting layer of product first versus community first, and that whole discussion. So if you want to check that out, definitely go back in the archives and find that one with Doris. It was a good one. And the framework that I presented in there was this element. And where I like to introduce this framework is whenever a client or a prospect starts to ask me a little bit about, or their customer support and how can community help with support, this is what I fall back to, right? And it's a 4-step process is how I really look at this, right? And this is the way I would like to think through engineering and structuring the community. And so the first thing I would look at, step one, would be to help people who've got like a problem and they want to submit a ticket, or they want to ask a question, or they've got an issue with the product, right? Which we get it, when people are vibe coding all sorts of AI slop, problems happen. It's like all of a sudden some sort of bug in the product's not working, or their account's locked out, or all sorts of different things, right? So they go into the community, or they look to see how they can get help and support. And the first thing to do within your community as you onboard in, or as you organize your community structure, is to try and make it as self-service as possible. So if it's like a frequent issue or whatever, right? Like immediately having that announcement or that area with the right information, moderators can quickly point you to it. But for the most part, it's like if you go in, there's a frequently asked questions section, and maybe it's covered right there. Right in the onboarding, there's like a helpful guide for you that is enabling you to get the answer to your question right away, so that you don't have to call in customer support or submit a ticket. You literally land in the community and you can self-serve. The next layer to it, which is growing in its ability and just capability in general, is to leverage AI assistance. And this is one where we do have a variety of different projects we've worked with, where we've implemented AI bots within like a specific channel, so that if people had a question, they ask a question in that channel. If the AI bot has the answer in its knowledge basis or in a previously answered question, it'll quickly drop you the answer. And I think this is one that a lot of people, there's lots of different products and tools out there. We used, Pluna, we've used a variety of different ones. And the main component is just making sure you have an up-to-date knowledge basis that the AI can pull from. And when someone answers or asks a question that hits enough confidence score for it, that it's like, I can answer this, it gives them the answer right away. And so that way they can come in, if they can't find it self-serve, boom, they have the AI help them get their answer. Now, this whole left side of it is on the element of independency, right? I think we see a lot of developers. It's a very common trait. So if this is great for if you have like an AI tool or something, they're independent. Like honestly, a lot of people, they do not want to pick up the phone. They do not want to talk to someone. They want to go find the answer themselves. They want to be enabled. So this is all about self-enablement on this left side. Speed, it's efficient, it scales to any size, nobody's involved. Now let's say that doesn't work for either of those components. Now you've got the other layer. This is where the community first comes into effect big time. So the AI bot doesn't answer, let's say. Then someone else chimes in, right? This is like if you can create a culture where people will chime in and say, oh, I had that problem as well, or whatnot. And because I think at our core too, it's like, how do you open up this channel where we as humans, like we do want to help each other. Like I see people helping each other every day, right? And I think that's if you can open up the permission in a certain sense for people to act that way, and the structure for them to be able to do it, then you start to get the kind of community leaning in. I mean, if you look in the past, like the amount of old school community forums, if you've got like a certain car, like I was on all sorts of different forums when I was repairing like my had a 1978 C20 Chevrolet, right? And there was forums for it online, old school forums, and you could look up a problem. It'd come up, and you'd be like carburetor, boom, all these different types of carburetors. And then you see people having, conversation on an issue with them and how to like tune them or something, right? And so, you can look at the previous community conversations and contexts and unique circumstances that people had. And then you can also, ask your question and get experts to chime in. This is like often what's cool about this is this can often train this. So the more your community answers questions and has conversations around it, it can train like the knowledge basis for the AI. So the next time that question comes up, it can be answered. But where this just becomes so valuable is for those unique circumstances that are just like, um, not the exact same every time. And also the cool thing about this too, and why it's nice to not just over index on just AI everything, is this builds more community as well. When people actually participate and they respond and like there's questions and answers and things going back and forth and there's dialogue, like there's just a great layer to that. And I think we also see a lot of this with Reddit threads. Like you go on a Reddit thread when you Google something and it's almost like fascinating to read through like just looking through someone's conversation back and forth in a sub thread about something. Right. And then maybe even the brand jumps in, stuff like that. We see that type of thing. So that's the big bucket there on community answering questions, right? For people. And then finally, there's components where maybe they actually need the brand to chime in or the project. Maybe there's something private they want to share, their wallet or it's financial or something very specific to their account and whatnot. And here is where you leverage within the community like tiered support. So depending on maybe the members or users' loyalty, how long they've been a member, how much they've invested into the product and whatnot, creating the right channels so that their ticket can be routed accordingly based off of that, right? So smart routing and priority systems, especially like, within the crypto space, if they've got a huge amount of money in their wallet or something, like you probably want to prioritize more white glove and not have them pissed off about something because then they'll churn. That was a lot of potential revenue for you, right? So it's almost like smart revenue retention layer with like how you organize support, and especially smart tiers if you're having a high volume of it. And then overall, if you get this machine humming around the enablement and around the community and the tiered support ticketing systems and whatnot, and you're smart about it, you can start to track what they call like the support deflection. And this is a beautiful ROI side to community when it comes to product-based communities, because if your community is answering questions and building up knowledge bases and feedback and all these different valuable things and organizing what actually needs to get escalated to the support engineers, you're saving so much support engineer time. Because otherwise, if you just don't have this engine humming, people are going to go straight to just like submit ticket, and they get angry and they go to X and they go to like social platforms and they like complain about it and they tag the company, and it's like, you don't want that type of social exposure, right? You want people to have an outlet in the community, right? And you don't want to also load up your support engineers with tons of tickets. You want to have a smart system that, organizes that and deflects it, as you say, support deflect cost. And there's a beautiful case study, which I'll share, from Richard Millington, great community consultant. And I can't even believe how his client let him do this, but he basically did a temporary experiment where I guess maybe the client was like potentially a bit dubious or doubtful of the value of the community. And they basically shut down the community. They made the community completely frozen. You couldn't find it. They just turned this light switch off on it. Boom, community was like frozen and dead. And then they measured the increase in support phone calls and in tickets that the product had. And it was insane. They were not able to handle the volume of it. It like ended up with the sentiment reports like decreasing. They did like, I think it was only like maybe 2 weeks or a month they did this. And then they actually organized and tracked the actual cost of that. And it was over $1 million in like support engineers time and ticket time and like all these different components. And then they reopened the community and like, I don't know, and then it reabsorbed back all that kind of aspects of the community, deflecting that and whatnot, right? So I think a really brilliant case study. He's not allowed to disclose. He didn't disclose who the client was, and I just can't believe they allowed him to do it. But it's a brilliant old school blog and an article that he wrote about this a good few years ago. But yeah, support deflection, this whole thing. What are your thoughts, Tommy?
Yeah, you beat me to it. The two words, support deflection. It's a massive term that I think people's like mindsets are changing on it. It used to just be like, oh, how can we divert people without having to them speak to people? But people understanding that this is a lot better approach. And when I look at the support loop, there's really two things that I see. Number one is like if you're on the sort of left side of this, there's a lot more foundational work for the company to do to make sure that that they've got the right sort of documentation, the right sort of self-service documents, everything there. And all the way on the right is like that's where you've got your stuff organized. So because of that, I see it as a timeline. It's like you can't really like you need your self-service and all them documentation, everything there built right in order to make the AI assistant correctly. And then that helps like feedback from people actually using that. They become community members that can answer them questions because they've went through this process, they've had this sort of learning, this education from that process. And then you can be like, oh hey, this guy's like managed to help like 100 different people. The data's showing us that. We're going to put him in like a community support channel. This guy is like a builder, put him in like a builder's channel, and like then it like really allows you to build this tiered support out. And yeah, support deflection, it's a great way for a company to save a lot of money. And a lot of reason I think why people are starting to realize that community is not just for attention, right? It's like it's to help you build your stuff. And with the era of vibe coding, you've got more builders in your community than ever before, right? So
Phew. Oh yeah, that's a good point. And yeah, I think like this is the side of community that's closer to product. And boy, is there a hell of a lot of product stuff going on right now in this day and age, right? So let us throw it on. I think it's super valuable. I definitely think obviously if it's support, you're not super early. So I think it's more on the growing side, it's more on the right side. Difficulty to implement. I mean, docs and creating an AI bot and that stuff. I mean, to write good docs and to create a good AI system and to build the right ticketing system, it's a bit more complex, I would say. So, but I would say it's worth it when you can obviously get that deflection level. So I'm thinking somewhere up here. How do you feel about this region, Tommy? What's your
yeah,
gut
for
telling
sure.
you?
For sure. I think even a little bit higher because it's like it's something that you can't just do once. You have to keep analyzing and keep improving each step. You can't just build the docs and a year later still have the same things. You need to update it all. It needs to keep flowing.
I agree. We got it up there. All right. Last one. This is a fun one. Pirate metrics, or the better way to call this, I don't know why I called it pirate metrics. I haven't even looked at this yet. Is our framework, right? I know whenever I say it, I
I
have
wish
to do
I wish I wish I had a pirate sound effect preloaded for this one actually. Next time.
right. Whenever I say it, I just feel like I have to like curve my finger. Like instantly, I've got the hook. I'm just like, it's just happens. So, what is the R framework? This is basically walking through a funnel in a certain sense, and it's a good way to actually think about more of a product led growth funnel. Is kind of a little bit of the actual approach or outline of this, but I think it's actually really effective to think about this balance of community-led growth versus product-led growth. And there's a bit of like a community translation layer to this framework. Because if you look up Pirate Metrics, the R framework, it's by Category Design, the Category Design Pirates. It's a great book as well, by the way. There's some really good stuff out that those people put out there. And he does this with a lot of different startups. He's big in the startup ecosystem and whatnot. And so it's just walking through the funnel basically around acquisition, how are people discovering you? So, who is arriving? This is like the component around the top. I would say like understanding where they're finding you from, the different channels, the different layers to it. This is like the product side of it, right? Activation. This is then around, what's the next action that they take, right? Like what is that activation layer? Is that activation like them actually subscribing to your product? Like what, action almost crosses the boundary per se, I would almost elaborate it as, right? And then there's the degree, okay, they've crossed the boundary, they've activated, are they engaging? What's the retention level? Are they staying active? Are they staying, a paying member? Are they staying, having conversations and whatnot, right? And then if they're staying and they're active, how do you have this component of, are they telling other people about it, the referral layer to it, right? And this is, where the ambassadors might live. This is like, are they, willing to put their own reputation per se to say, hey, I actually really love this product, you should try it out. And what does that end up in? Increased aspects of revenue. Like, will they actually pay? I think I've mentioned that a few times, but like, is there a component of them, investing actual, money into that product or into that element, right? And so I think like the overall base marketing funnel here is interesting, but when you force like the question of looking at the same funnel in almost different spaces, whether it's within the product side of it, where you get to revenue, and the marketing product side of it, I guess you could say together, right? To then like the community side of it, which almost runs in parallel with a very similar funnel, right? And the community side of it really drives and hooks in on like the referral layer to it, I would say, right? But can you bring someone through this similar funnel of, so let's just walk through a parallel scenario because I've been saying that a lot. You've got a product that people subscribe to for $30 a month, and it lets them, animate PDFs. I don't know. That's a random thing that's popped in my head. So it's like an animation of PDFs type of product, whatever, right? Video animation tool. Then in parallel, then maybe they have a community, right? And so on the acquisition channel side of things, how are people discovering it, right? They got social, they got content, they got stuff going out. And then they might have this layer of activation. Are they taking action? Are they like signing up for the free trial on the product side? On the activation side, on the community side, it might mean, are they, you know, joining the actual community platform? Are they joining the Discord, the Telegram, or whatever, right? And the activation side for the community might mean, are they asking a question? Are they like inquiring about it? Are they, showing buying signs, right? And whatnot, right? Retention on the product side means they're keeping subscribed. They like activate, they pay for it, and they're maybe keeping subscribed to it, whatever, right? Um, and then on the community side, it could just be like, are they staying active, asking questions? And on the referral side, might be a product-led code. They're referring people, to the product. To the, hey, you need to use this as well. And then on the community side, it can be, hey, you should join this community. There's a campaign or something that we're doing here, like join in on this, right? And then of course, both of them really peaking towards increased revenue and like more payments and bring more people in, right? But yeah, I think there's an interesting dance on just like the marketing classic. There's a very classic marketing product funnel to the similar dance in parallel world of the community funnel. But yeah, what do you think of that dance, Tony?
Yeah, it's nice. The pirate funnel. What I really like about this is like when I look at this, I think of like courses online. And what is it? Like 80% of people that buy courses don't finish them, or something like some crazy stat like this. So when you sort of apply that to here, people might be acquired and activating the community and they keep coming back and they're actually buying a course which is making revenue before, but then to refer people and push them down that funnel even more to make them bring more revenue, that's the difficult part because they might be embarrassed they haven't finished this course. So they're not going to tell people, well, hey, go and do that course, it's awesome, and like they haven't finished it. So it's like it's a really nice way to understand as well the volume of people in them different layers, and how to sort of push them down. But yeah, we love a good old funnel at CoUnity for sure.
Yeah, and shout out to these guys, Category Pirates, a beginner's guide to category design. I believe this is one of the frameworks within it when you think through like the funnel aspect. Good shout out to them. So let's drop them on here. So we're very much, I would say, again, in more of a mature stage because it is borderline product side and whatnot. And as for difficulty, I mean, there's a lot of stages to it, but it is, somewhat easy to understand. I would say somewhere in the middle again on this advanced side. Man, we've got a lot plotted in here. What's your gut, Tommy? What are you thinking?
Yeah, I mean, like you sort of need to be established to understand these different dynamics, and from a planning point of view you can only do so much. And then difficulty, um I mean, it's somewhere in the middle. There's just a lot in the middle, Dan.
Yeah. Let's like let's move this guy over a little bit. Just make him some space right there. There we go. You can slot in right there. Um, that works.
What we should have done maybe next time is we will both have our own screens and plot them where they want, and then we can see where we're thinking, right?
I'm just glad that we didn't make any sort of inappropriate images while we drop these on these charts, you know, and we look back at it and we're like, oh geez,
Oh,
that's not
geez.
professional. But awesome. I'm glad everyone stayed tuned in, and hopefully this was helpful, valuable. One thing we wanted to make sure we don't forget to mention is we're building out, and we're gonna like launch it, I guess, here shortly as well. A bit of a vault, call it, where we're placing all the information, the resources for these frameworks, along with other good stuff. In a way, different lead magnets and whatnot. So you can go over there to that vault, you can put your email in, and boom, you can unlock the vault and you can have access to all these different free resources. Don't want to gatekeep, want to put it all out there, and might be gearing up at some point, as I said, to drop some sort of newsletter flow and just put more good things out. So I really hope this helps unblock people with any sort of, you know, community friction points they may have. It's probably a little bit overwhelming around like, well, which one should I pick? And, you know, which situation am I in and whatnot? And if you're not sure which one, like I said, this was just 7 of like the 25 that we've already covered, and we're covering more each week. There's going to be a new one next week. So, yeah, if you're a little bit overwhelmed by it all, definitely just feel free to reach out to us. We'd be happy to jam with you and hear a little bit more exactly on where your community's at, and we'll go from there. But yeah, you can find myself here on the X, and you can find lovely co-host Tommy here. And you can find and I think reach out on the forum side of things as well on our website over here. Did I miss anything, Tommy? Any final words, final comments?
Yeah, no, I just always feel as well people tend to maybe do like one framework and they're like, oh, this is it. This is the grand plan. Like when you actually apply a few different types of frameworks to what you're building, it allows you to uncover things that you could have missed and make a better plan, you know. So never just stick to one. There you go. There's the tip of the day.
Nice. Well, appreciate you all, and we'll catch you on the next one, eh? Peace.
See you later, everyone.